and welcome to Fun Problems, the problems of fun. I'm Peter C. Hayward.
I'm AJ Brandon.
And today we are doing an episode of our podcast that we do. What a novel idea for us to get together and record a podcast episode. Are you excited, AJ?
I am kind of excited because I'm glad that this episode's going to exist. I'm kind of sad because I'm just redoing the thing I already did.
And you really hate it? Yeah.
So a bit of context for this one. Years ago, when I worked for a board game store, I noticed the same sort of patterns happening over and over again, where the same kinds of games would sell and the same kinds of games wouldn't sell. And it wouldn't matter what the gameplay is in the box, because that's not how people buy games. Like, of course, if they play a demo game, then they can do that.
Right. But in a board game retail environment, that's not how people are buying games.
Yeah, you pick up something off the shelf and you decide, do you want to take a further look at it, et cetera, et cetera. And so I put on a little presentation that was titled, Why Your Good Game Won't Sell, or How to Design a Retailer-Friendly Game.
Now, this predates the podcast by years, right?
Yeah, this was, I think, 2018, if I recall correctly. And I put it on twice, and we actually had pretty solid turnouts for that. There's a lot of local Toronto designers that popped out. I hope they got some good info. And I was really pleased with it. I think it had a lot of good information. But unfortunately, it got taken down from YouTube. And so now we're going to go through my old slides, and we're going to give 2025 perspectives on the 2018 lecture. So maybe some things I don't agree with. I haven't actually read through every single slide.
This also, I think this could broadly be described as product versus game. Is that something Absolutely. You get into in the slides? But like that seems to be the essence of it.
This is basically product design, and to a slightly more extended extent, like I would say this talk is more relevant for publishers than it is for designers. But it's the type of thing where, you and I both talk so much about how designers need to think about games product first.
Absolutely. I was like, is it more useful? I guess it's more directly useful, but if you want to get published, you need to start thinking like a publisher, and it all ripples down.
I would say if you're self-publishing, this will have maximum value. Let's put it that way.
I also just want to mention there is construction happening next door. I think it's stopped for lunch, but it might pick up again. So if you hear weird sounds, sorry about that. We will give you a full refund on the cost of this episode.
100%.
AJ, take it away.
Okay. So first things first, this is actually a sponsored episode. Not because we are getting more money, but because I was paid to put together the first
That's not what a sponsored episode means. That's not how that... This really should be presented by Fun Problems.
The problems of fun. Geez. So my slides are fairly text light. The way that I like to do presentations is I have very little text to prompt me to be able to say all the things that I had bubbling up in my head. So some of these slides, I'm sure I had more to say back then. This one was just me doing a caveat that I'm going to tear some games a new one, and I didn't want to hurt any feelings because this is all in the spirit of constructive criticism.
If you're a podcast listener and you somehow missed the fact that we now also host our episodes on YouTube, I'll do my best to describe the slides as they come up, but I might miss stuff, and the whole episode with visuals is available on YouTube. So that previous slide that AJ was talking about was a piece of paper being torn, which is what people mean when they use the phrase "tear them a new one." They're always talking about paper, 100% of the time. So we have a baseball flying towards the camera, and it says, "The pitch. Who is selling your game? Targeting your audience. Types of pitches. How can you help me pitch your game? As in, how can you, the designer or publisher, help AJ pitch your game?"
Exactly. Because again, this is from the perspective of me as a store manager / salesman. And so the crux of this talk was framing the way that your product is designed as a pitch to a potential customer. The same way that you're pitching your games to publishers, effectively, they're going to be pitching the games to customers via the box. So that's sort of the bent that I want to take here. And the presentation, this is a high-level overview. We're going to be looking at who is the person selling your game, how to target your audience with your product design, what different types of pitches there are, and of course, how can you help me pitch your game? Because if the easier you make it for the salespeople, the more likely your game is to get sold, because you aren't there to do the selling. It doesn't matter how good of a salesman you are about your own game.
Yeah. I just got back from Tantrum Con, where I had a great time. My first convention back because I took the last year off. And at one point, I went on. I was sitting here being like, "Did I talk about this on the podcast?" I remember doing it verbally, but I don't think I did it on the podcast. Forgetting that I'd actually been around real life designers in a real life environment. So at some point, AJ's given me full permission to interrupt and interject. So at some point, I'll do my. I'm calling it the last stage pitch spiel.
Ooh, exciting! Don't forget to do that. Maybe make a note.
I wrote it down.
Perfect.
Who is selling your game? Friendly local game store owner? Minimum wage employee? A friend? Passionate employee? Pro?
That's it.
That's it. Oh, that's it? You didn't have any thoughts on any of that? Oh, right. You're going to dive into them. I see.
Yeah.
I was like, is this just me reading a slideshow?
No, so this is a high-level overview. These are the different types of people that are going to be selling a game to potential customers. Now, I'm going to add another one that probably should have been on here, which is a tastemaker. So this could be, a board game reviewer or something, someone watches the review on Dice Tower or something and says, "Oh, that looks cool, check it out," or watches a stream of someone playing, those sorts of things. But this, again, was from the perspective of me as the salesman in the store, less so about people doing their own research and buying their own things.
Right. Someone coming in and being like, "I already want to buy this game, sell it to me." Like, that's not a pitch anymore.
Yeah. So I do touch on the online sales a tiny bit, but just a tiny bit in this presentation.
So a friend is closest to what I was just talking about. Friendly local game store owner. Overworked. Passionate. Knowledgeable about older and red-hot titles only. Oh, that's a really good point.
Thank you. So this is partially informed from the boss that I used to work for, but I do know other local game store owners, and they have all sort of met with this basic criteria. Not criteria, but these are observations I have, generally speaking, about them. Because there's not a lot of money in it, they are often overworked. They're usually doing the job of 2 or 3 people, unless you have a very, very successful large FLGS, but then that sort of creeps into a different territory. And so they're very passionate about games in general, but they know about games from back when they were playing games. Nowadays, they often don't have as much time for games because they spend all their time working. And the only games that they have time to learn about are the ones that are selling like hotcakes. Or the ones that are coming from really established publishers and that sort of thing. So they're not going to do a... Yeah.
I was going to say, this also sort of describes a lot of like professional game designers these days. Like I know game designers who do this full time, who are not paid much. You have to constantly hustle. They obviously got into it because they love games. But I can't keep up with all the games. Like, it's impossible. And many of my full-time game designer friends, like, we know a lot about older games. So, like, even listening to this podcast, you're probably constantly hearing me draw examples from, I don't know, Dominion or whatever, like, stuff that is literally more than a decade old at this point. And I will try. I'll go to conventions and try to play some of the newer games. But given a choice between 3 hours learning a game and playing it, or running 3 of my own prototypes, I have to choose my prototypes, like, or even playing someone else's prototypes so that they will play mine. Like, that's where my energy has to go. So maybe I'll know some games because I played them in prototype form, but like, I haven't played SETI yet. From everything that everyone's told me, SETI sounds like it's exactly for me. It is the exact Peter game on every level. I don't know if I'll get a chance to play it this year. I went to Tantrum Con with the intent of playing Slay the Spire, the physical game. I did not play a single published game at Tantrum Con. I was just running prototypes from 9 a.m. till 3 a.m. every day. Mine and mostly other people's actually at that convention. But like, I just don't have time to play published games. If something really breaks through, or if someone like literally sits down and goes, "Peter, you have to play this. This is the new hotness," I will, but this little description here is like such a incredible overlap with professional game designer.
I don't know if you have this too, but I feel like an obligation sometimes more than like an excitement. I'm like, oh, I do need to check this out, like professionally speaking, so I understand like the landscape of the market or what's going on.
And by the way, the advice is still correct. Play as many games as you can, and I literally do play as many games as I can. I just can't play that many.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like when I was playing or yeah, when I was playing more games back when I worked at Board Game Bliss, I was playing like 300 games a year. Like seriously, maybe more.
Yeah.
And nowadays, I think I can actually tell you exactly how much if I pulled it up, but I think it's like 50 board games in a year, which is still pretty good. But like I have to put an effort to get that many different games played.
Yeah, I'm friends with a lot of content creators, and just the sheer rate that they have to play games is terrifying.
Yeah, this is a good way to suck the fun out of it for a lot of people.
Minimum wage employee. Mass market. Doesn't care. Not knowledgeable. Ugly. Bad breath. Wow, AJ, this is really...
So this is definitely stereotypical. But if you go to the average Walmart employee, say, and you're like, "Hey, what's a good modern board game?"
You're doing it wrong. Is the
yeah, they're probably not going to know. Many people who work at these types of jobs don't care because they're not just selling board games; they're selling a lot of other types of products. This is like board games isn't the average Walmart employee's passion, so they're not going to be knowledgeable on it. So again, they're not going to do a great job of selling your game, unfortunately.
How friends pitch ownership. How friend is pitch. Vague on mechanics. Specific on theme. Feel matters. Moments. Oh yeah, I remember this. I've watched this probably 5 years ago, 10 years ago now, 7 years, whatever it was. So I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this whole bit. this is like a commentary from someone who vaguely remembers it. I'm like, oh, this next bit, I think is good. Go.
So this is talking about the way that your friends pitch games. So typically speaking, when I see people come into the store and they see a game on the shelf that they know, and they're like, oh, come over here. This is a great game. They pick up and they're like, so this one, they will never say a single mechanic. I don't think I have ever seen a friend be like, oh, look at this game, and tell them the mechanics without them being like, the super hardcore, like us crowd.
Right.
Like an actual designer that I know, or someone who's playing going on BGG daily or weekly type of thing.
Yeah. So
they're not going to talk about the mechanics. They don't even know the names of mechanics. They might not even know the term mechanic. They probably do in 2025, but maybe not. They'll be very specific on the theme though. They'll be like, this is Blood Rage. It's Vikings, and you summon monsters, and you use battles and beat each other up and stuff. They didn't say it's a drafting game.
It's a drafting area control game. Yeah.
So for the friends pitch, the feel of the game is what's going to come through. And like we've said before on the podcast, this is Eric Lang's model, moment design, where you try and design the game such that cool moments are going to arise over the course of the game, because that's what they're going to remember, and that's what they'll tell them about. Oh, this really cool thing happened in Nemesis, where I was trying to work with this person and realized they're betraying me, and then sealed them inside this room with the alien queen and tore them apart. It was awesome. They're not going to tell you any of the mechanics as to how they did it. They're just going to be like, this was the cool moment that I remember from the game. So if you're trying to design a game such that friends pitching the game is going to be easy, you need to focus on moments, focus on feel matters, and focus on something that's highly thematic.
This is, like I said, this is what I've got a whole spiel about that I'll get into after the presentation.
Do you want to just do it now?
Say
that might be a good time.
Yeah, maybe. Before that, though, I just want to say that this is something that I think I'm almost curious to rewatch our Peter Tears Apart AJ Cell Sheets episode, because I feel like this is the thing that I want to say this is what I was focusing on. Like, I haven't watched the episode since we did it, but I vaguely remember being like, oh, look, a list of mechanics. Like, I don't care. And I feel like this is the number one thing that as designers pitching our games, we could really take from. Like, saying, as a designer, it's very exciting to say, look, I've got a game. It's called Fairy Garden, and it is a drafting, bidding, area control game with a really simple novel mechanic that no one's done before. I'm already asleep from that description. Like, as a designer, that's what's really cool about it. As a publisher, as a player, as a friend pitching it, no one cares. Like, the only even vaguely relevant part of that is just how incredibly slick the game is, but there's a better way to say it than this game has one simple mechanism. And I think, like, we'll talk about this later too. We're going to start doing more cell sheet episodes. Like, this almost I want to be our guiding light. Like, stop diving into the depths of mechanics, get into theme, get into feel, get into moments. Like, if you can hit those things, you will outsell a designer who has the cleverest mechanism in the world 100 times over.
One of the things that I do is, I talked about this on a very recent episode about having a design doc before you start. And the goal of that one is more to pitch it to co-designers to help you get on the same page as to what the deal is. But one of the things I write down every time is the vision. Like, what is the core exciting thing about this game? And the way that I think of it today as AJ in 2025 is, what are you going to write down as the one sentence thing on your sell sheet that excites publishers? So I think absolutely focusing on this and focusing on
the elevator pitch.
Exactly.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your sell sheet document that you recently reworked and uploaded? Not sell sheet, your design doc, the thing that you did.
I'll tell you what. How about at the end of this presentation, I just literally pull it up, the template, and then we'll talk through it.
Okay, here's my spiel, and I'm worried that I'm stealing some of your talking points because it was probably partially informed by watching this presentation. A game, this is why I didn't want to do it. It's a little bit long, so bear with me.
Okay.
A game starts in your brain. You're like, oh, this tickles my brain in some way. And then the very last step is people playing it on the table, right? Like, that's the journey of a game idea, from literally conception to being played in a published version on the table. And I'm talking about pitching to publishers here. Self-publishing is its own game, but I think it's relevant to both. There are a number of sale points or pitches or gates in between original idea and on the table. So the first one is, I have to like it enough to write it into more than just an idea in my head. And that can be, the single sentence in my design folder that you and I talked about, going through our design docs and just being like, here's 20 ideas that we didn't ever work on, just because it's a fun little exercise. That'll be a bonus episode someday. And then the next step is an MVP, or even just like starting to prototype it. Then the next step is an MVP and playtesting it, and then playtesting it enough in MVP form that you're like, okay, this is worth showing to other people or building out a nicer version. And then you want to show it to then you want to show it to your fellow playtesters, and you want to like playtest it more widely. Then you want to show it to a publisher, and then the publisher has to sell it to retailers or to Kickstarter backers, and retailers or Kickstarter backers have to buy it. And then this is what I'm calling the last stage pitch. When the person who has already bought the game, they have physically bought it, they have a copy, how do they convince their friends to play it? This is the last stage pitch. And this is what I've been thinking about a whole lot lately, which is why you can see how it's directly relevant to this slide that we're on right now. The last stage pitch is something I really started thinking about 2 years ago, because I started attending some local game groups. One was mostly just regular gamers and a few content creators. The other is mostly regular gamers and like one or two designers. And I don't even know if they're published designers. So we can treat that one as just purely a gaming group. And I'm so fascinated, and I think it's super relevant as a designer who wants to publish their games, which is what this podcast is geared towards, to start thinking about, how does that person get their friends excited to play the game? Because in the group that's all just gamers, they all back Kickstarters, and they only meet once a week. So once a week, everyone sort of comes along with a game and has to convince the group to play their game over others. And it's such a universal and also specific moment that once I started thinking in this context, I might have talked about this on the podcast before because I'm about to go into Dracula's Feast. Once I started thinking about this context, I started selling a lot more games. Dracula's Feast is it's the second game I ever designed. It's a logical deduction game. It's sort of social deduction. It's sort of logical deduction. And it's a game with a 10 to 15 minute teach that plays in about 5 minutes. It requires a large group to sit in silence for most of the time and think really hard. And if anyone makes a mistake, the game breaks. It is unsaleable. Like, I first really started thinking about this when a friend of mine was like, hey, Peter, I brought Dracula's Feast to my group who love social deduction games and it didn't really land. And I was like, well, of course it didn't land. Of course, like, obviously it wouldn't land in that group. But also that's the only group who it could possibly like. It's for no one. It is a game for absolutely no one. And so many prototypes, and AJ, I'm sure you'll confirm this, so many prototypes you play and you're like Dracula's Feast is really clever. It's really interesting and really clever. I'm very proud of a lot of stuff in that. It's for no one. Like these can both be true facts. There are so many games that I play. I don't want to name anything because I think some of them are by listeners, where I'm just like, yeah, look, you've made a very good functioning system that I don't know who's going to be specifically excited to get their friends to play it. Does that make sense?
This is something we were talking about recently, which is games that are more fun to design than they are to play.
Yeah, literally yesterday when we were just on a call, I have got some games in my catalog where I think I've said before, I know I've said to you, AJ, I think I've said on the podcast, after 18 months, I generally don't like my old designs, and that's because I am just like learning and improving at such a rapid rate, he said modestly, that anything I made more than 18 months ago, I'm like, I wouldn't make it that way anymore. Like, cool, good job, young Peter. Good job, little baby. But like, I've outgrown this game, so it's very frustrating to me because a game takes more than 18 months to come out. So by the time it comes out, I'm like, yeah, cool. I have to go be excited about it, but I'm just not anymore. I'm excited for the next thing. So yeah, games that are more exciting, more fun to design than they are to make is one way of putting it. But specifically, the useful kind of path is genuinely being like, who is going to take this game? Where are they going to take it to? And how are they going to sell it to their friends? And you've covered some of this in the friends pitch, but the two groups I mentioned, one of them is all heavy euros all the time. So heavy euro gets you in the door, but it doesn't get you to the table. The other one are Omnigamers. Like they have the last few hours of every party. The last few hours of every party are party games. They will play anything from like 20 light games to 3 heavy euro. Like they will play anything, literally anything that is designed that's not, Uno or Exploding Kittens is for this group. And so it's just so interesting because everyone turns up with bags of games. And as a designer, it's such good market research. They're also my friends and I like hanging out with them, but it's such good market research to be like, who am I making this game for and what gets it to the table instead of other games? Because ultimately, games are a competitive sport. Game design is competitive in a sense, in that like not every game can be published. Some are going to win over others. I'm not saying go out and tear down your opponents or anything like that, but like ultimately there are limited spaces for games to come out. And so you've got to start thinking like, why will they play this game over another one? Things and Rings is my biggest hit, and that one sells itself. People love Venn diagrams. People are just like, oh, Venn diagram. It's so easy to get people in. It really plays up to any numbers. It says, I think, 2 to 6 on the box, but really you can play with any number of people in that game. And by looking at the table, you have learned most of the rules. Like that game is just so incredibly accessible and kind of thinky and quirky and kind of different and causes discussion and causes arguments, which 5 years ago, 3 years ago, I would have been like, that's a bad idea. Now I'm like, no, that propagates the game. Like if people are discussing it for 20 minutes later, it sticks in their head and they want to have that discussion with other people in their life. So Things and Rings is my biggest hit. And it's also the one that can just get on the table of any table at any time with anyone. But a game like Critter Kitchen, just because I'm on my own games, like that one is a feast. In that, like, it's what Stonemaier always talking about. They're like, we want the game that is the main game of the evening. And that one is a big box with beautiful, beautiful pieces and incredible art. The game is also very fun, but that's not what's getting it to the table. That's what got it into the publisher. But what's getting it to the table is the lavish production and the fact that we designed a game that could be lavishly produced. I was talking about this on Discord. I realize I've been talking for 5 minutes now in the middle of AJ's presentation, but you did ask me to, AJ. You did tell me to. I was on a Discord and someone was like, yeah, how much time do you spend removing components from your games? And yeah, games should be as elegant and slick as possible, but having more components can sometimes, for certain publishers, be the thing to do.
It can also,
AJ, you talk some, not just monologuing.
Yeah, it can also be the opposite, right? And this depends on your target audience. Having a lot of cool stuff is appealing to heavier gamers. Seeing 50 different kinds of components out on the table is incredibly intimidating to casual gamers.
Yeah, but having beautiful components on the table is incredibly appealing to all gamers.
Yes, absolutely.
So something like Azul only has one type of component, but it is beautiful. It is clicky-clacky. And so that game has, it's still a classic 7 years after release or 10 years after release, whatever we're at. So yeah, removing components, not always good, he said controversially, because I've started thinking about like, well, at this content creator thing, the game that gets to the table is going to be the prettiest. And I don't just mean like nice art. I mean like you start unpacking it, people are like, ooh, I want to touch that. Ooh, I want to play with that. Ooh, clicky clacky pieces. Ooh, this will photograph well for my Instagram. Like that is a genuine like way in. Obviously not all parties have content creators, but people like pretty games, people like taking photos. Yeah, so that's my the more you think about the last stage pitch, as I'm calling it, I think the more and that's exactly what this model is. You're talking about this in the store, but I think this exactly applies to that moment I'm talking about of like bringing it to the table. Oh, sorry, one more thing on that before we move on. I was saying that a lot of prototypes are not for anyone. Dracula's Feast is a great example, published game, but it's when people try to marry these two unrelated things. So, oh man, I'm really trying not to call out specific people, but let's say I made let's use Dracula's Feast because I can safely rag on my own game. It is a thinky logic puzzle for a large number of players. So I have made thinky logic puzzles. That Time You Killed Me is a thinky logic puzzle. Things and Rings is borderline. Oh, Fiction's a better example. Fiction is a thinky logic puzzle, but Fiction marries thinky logic puzzle and word game. And those are, I want to say comorbidities because my girlfriend uses that term all the time. Those are in the Venn diagram, that's a huge overlapping space. Thinky puzzle, word game that fits the same type of brain, same type of party environment, same type of game night, same type of player. Large group thinky puzzle is a horrible mix. And it's not to say it can't be done. Like Welcome to arguably fits that category, but you say something.
I'm not sure I'm following the point you're making here, to be honest.
So a lot of people, I'm gonna use Nate, who I love dearly. Nate Wall, listener of the podcast, his game is just the perfect example of this. He got frustrated because he was going to a lot of game nights with his family, and they just wanted to play dexterity game. They wanted to play like silly light flippant games.
I see where this is going.
And so he got bored with those. So he made a dexterity set collection game where you do a dexterity thing and then you have a little puzzle. And that combination, in my mind, sorry Nate, you know I love you dearly, is exactly the thing I'm talking about. There is almost no overlap in that Venn diagram. As a designer, I see how he got there. As a designer, I understand the appeal of like, it's two things that have never been put together, but they're not targeting the same group. They're targeting almost diametrically opposite groups, much like Dracula's Feast. And so there's no party game night where someone pitches that and it gets through the ring of fire.
To try and say it a different way, if I'm understanding you correctly, it's Nate identified a genre that he wasn't into, wanted to make something that's in the genre that he would still be able to enjoy while being able to play it with people who primarily like that genre. But what you're saying is, in trying to sort of appeal to these two completely different audiences, you end up creating something that Nate would never buy off a shelf because It's not doing what Nate wants, and Nate's family would never buy off the shelf because it's not quite doing what they want. Is that accurate?
Yes. And it's not always that people get there from that starting point of like, I want to combine these two genres. Sometimes you're working on a project, working on a game, and it starts drifting in a direction and you follow that direction. And by the end of it, you have, a a math quiz for 100 people, which is not for anyone.
Right. It's like when roll and writes got popular, and I don't like roll and writes because their player interaction empty, almost all of them, at least at the time when they were really like taking off. And so my mind immediately went to, let's make some highly interactive roll and writes. But like the people who like roll and writes don't miss the player interaction, and people who really love player interaction aren't going to get super excited because now there's some player interaction in a puzzle that they don't care about.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of another example where like maybe you're working on a really fun, cool party game. You've got this great party game that plays 30 people and you're like, wow, this is amazing. But to solve design problems, you start adding rules. And by the end, you've got a 30-player party game that has a 20-page rulebook. And it's just not going to work. And it's not that you started by being like, what if I had a big party game with lots of rules? You just naturally got there as a result of the design path. That's the other way you get there. That's what I'm talking about. Like, not just starting from like, what if I made this thing that combined two genres? But sometimes you'll start from one place and end up just like in unpublishable territory. It has happened to me so many times. This is not anything to be embarrassed about. It's just something to just start thinking, can I literally think of a person who would, without knowing I made it, take this game to a game night and successfully get it to the table against other games? And if you don't have that, you might not have any. You might not have anything.
Yeah, player psychographics are super important. It's the same in a business concept. I've talked about this before. Gabe's talked about it on Board Game Design Lab with me. Making sure that
Richard
you have...
Garfield. Not Richard Garfield. Mark Rosewater talks about it a lot.
Yep, and the psychographics look different for each game type. Magic psychographics don't exactly one-to-one line up with board game players, for instance. But Mark Rosewater looked at Magic, said, who does this appeal to? Well, these types of cards appeal to this person, this type of card appeals to this person. Look at your game, like Peter says. And I think that you gave really good advice there. Literally think of a human in your life. Who in your life is going to be excited for this game? If you have a friend who's really into dungeon crawls and you're making a dungeon crawl-esque game, be like, hey, does this elevator pitch excite you? Would you be interested in looking more into it? Like that kind of thing. Start thinking in those sorts of terms. I literally did that actually with our friend Sean. I was like, this game is meant to be for you. What are your thoughts on it? I'm treating every word you say.
I'm also making a game for Sean right now. Sean's just very, very designable too.
I mean, I think every one of my games I just make for Sean. I just really want Sean to approve of it. That's my end game in this. Get a high five from Sean.
Sean's
all
great.
Right. Let's get back on track here.
Yes. I feel like I have a thought bouncing around my head, but I can't find it. So go ahead.
It'll probably come up again later because a lot of these things do come up in the presentation. All right, you want to keep reading?
Oh, sorry. I remember it. This is almost free fun market research. Go to a game night. Find a local event near you where it's just a public game night. And not like a creep, but watch which games get tabled and why. I go to these game nights to play games, to have fun, to hang out with my friends. It's useful for many reasons. But also just watching when people are like, what do we play next? That conversation is invaluable.
Yeah.
And it's fun market research. Okay. Passionate employee. Passionate. Employee. Knowledgeable. Often not good at sales.
So this is a bit of a contentious point here. But I remember I was talking to a Magic store, FLGS. They have some board games, but it was mostly Magic related.
FLGS is a friendly local game store. That's some industry terminology.
Thank you, Peter. So this person was talking to me about who they hire and why. And they said, I will always hire the person who knows Magic cards because I can't teach you how to know Magic, but I can teach you sales. And let me tell you, I have met a lot of his employees. And they're okay at best at sales. And yes, sales is absolutely infinitely more teachable than the knowledge of a 30,000 card game.
10,000 hours of Magic the Gathering knowledge.
It is impossible. But I have found that oftentimes, again, strictly speaking, as a salesman / woman, you are often not going to get a great one of those at FLGS. This is absolutely not a blanket statement like this is always going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm saying oftentimes they're not going to be the best salesperson. But they are going to be very knowledgeable and they are going to be very passionate about games. And that passion alone can 100% drive sales. So again, we're just talking broad strokes. Who's going to be selling your game? And then we get to
the professional with a man with a gun. James Bond, not just a man. Passionate, knowledgeable, great salesperson.
So these
look
AJ? Absolutely. I like to think so. You can ask previous patrons of Board Game Bliss for their opinion. I'm a little biased.
Did sales halve when you left?
Now, these people don't need much help from you as the designer or / product designer. They're going to be able to sell
Stand to the Desert or whatever it is.
Yeah, if a game box looks like a butt, they're going to be able to say it's actually full of gold and here's why, and they're going to do a great job. So obviously, the professional, like I said, doesn't need help. You can help them still, but the professional is very rare. Most people who are selling your games aren't going to be this. They are going to be friends. They are going to be a salesperson who doesn't know as much or who isn't as good at sales, those sorts of things. Again, this isn't exactly actionable advice that I'm giving you. I'm just talking right now to try and get you to realize how much help, or rather how much value helping them is. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Okay. So, and then the next slide is me just saying that.
Most retail people aren't knowledgeable, aren't passionate, almost all aren't good salespeople, need your help. Targeting your audience. Non-gamers / mass market. Casual, most common. Hardcore.
So this poorly spaced lines of text here is
and inconsistently capitalized while we're picking it apart.
This is just very broad strokes. We were talking about psychographics before. This is my psychographic. So this is super broad strokes, basically as broad as you can get, really. But for non-gamers or mass market, these people are the type that walk into a store, pick up a game off the shelf, and they're like, what's the back of the box look like?
or just what's the front of the box look like?
Yeah, seriously. They walk up and they're like, this says Game of Thrones. I like Game of Thrones. I will buy this thing.
Actually, I was thinking that's absolutely right. I was also thinking about the huge trend, maybe since this presentation, of meme game titles.
Yeah.
I can't think of a single one. No Cap
Exploding
is presumably
Kittens.
a game. I don't even know, but like, what's that?
I would say Exploding Kittens. Like it's or
Exploding Kittens, but I mean like titles that are just literally an existing meme. Now it's
sure.
a game title. So like, I don't know that there's a game called No Cap, but I promise you, there's a game called No Cap or Skibbity whatever, or you know, if it's a thing that you've heard of, someone has put that onto a game. Alex Cutler, who's on the podcast, he has a game called Don't Skip Leg Day. Like it's selling. It's like, remember I said don't even look at the back of the box. That's that kind of game. And I've seen those and been like, oh, I know exactly who I would buy that for. There was a game, I think either right before she passed or right after she passed, which was basically like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the game. And I was like, oh, I have 12 people in my life who would be delighted to receive that as a gift. It almost doesn't matter what the game is. Those ones, like at that level, and this is like the very extreme, literally the back of the box doesn't matter. Literally the front of the box doesn't matter except for the title. You're selling it purely based on the title.
Yeah, I mean, Whitney's game Charcuterie sells itself. No one's looking at the back of the box. No one cares. They're like, Charcuterie, the board game. I love Charcuterie, or my friend loves Charcuterie. I'll pick it up, you know?
My girlfriend, if I see a food game, I buy it for her. There's just like no processing between seeing a title or seeing a front cover and buying the game. It's just a straight line.
Another one
including
is...
charcuterie. I bought charcuterie for her.
Yeah, and this is where like product design is peak effective. Like, I bought Laser Riders. I'm an intelligent consumer here. I didn't even bother looking up a review for Laser Riders. I was like, it looks like it comes in like VHS cases and stuff like that. Like the vibes of it were 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
So let's not speak of the game itself, but the vibes.
I think I did some dev on that.
But did you really?
I don't know if they ever used any of my changes, but I think at some point I got paid some money to do something on that game.
Well, like I say, amazing product. That literally some of the best I've seen. And I will reference that exact game later. And we're going to go into a little bit more detail in the audience in a minute. But casual, this is the most common, I would say. This is the type of person, in terms of people who are going to buy your game. There's more mass market consumers out there, but in order to break into mass market or those types of people, you have to really make a hit or have a product that's selling to a publisher that is going to be able to sell it into mass market. Much less common for us as designers. Casual gamers, these are the type of people who have, say 50 game collection, and they're like, when they find out you're a gamer, like, oh, I have a lot of games. Like,
yeah, I was about to say, casual is 50 games. Jeez Louise.
Well, again, this is maybe not the strongest term here.
Maybe hobby is a better word than casual.
Sure. This is someone who they have like 50 games, but they play them and they play them a lot, right? They're like hanging out with their friends every week and they're busting out coup every single week.
Yeah. I would call this the hobby audience for sure. Gaming is their hobby. Like,
yep. I think it's very fair. And then for hardcore, that's us. That's people who are on BGG constantly. These are people who, maybe they're gamers who are so hardcore that they dabble in design. Maybe they're actual designers. Maybe these are people who are buying, multiple $300 Kickstarters a year, right? These are the BGG crowd. The people who, like, I recognize at the friendly local game store because they come in so often.
Yeah.
So for I guess this is I didn't go through all these slides beforehand. So for non-gamers and mass market types of things that help sell it, if it's got great visuals, funny titles, those sorts of things, if it seems simple and easy to pick up, the box is really big for selling this, and demoing is very important for selling this. So these are the ways that they're going to be. These are things that are going to appeal to them. Casual, they're going to most often get new games based off of recommendations. If one of the friends is like, oh, hey, here's a cool game, or they sit down to play like Bang with their friends, they're like, oh, Bang's a cool game, and they pick it up. I find that for this audience, that's the most often way that they will end up buying the game.
I would also put content creators as like a big source of recommendations. Like people who, they don't watch every Rado video or every Dice Tower video, but if Shut Up and Sit Down do a video, they're probably going to watch that and buy that game.
Yeah, I would say, I think for a lot of hobby gamers, they don't actually watch that many reviews and aren't actually that tuned into tastemakers. But again, the lines are a little blurry here, and we don't need to split hairs or anything.
I brought up Shut Up and Sit Down because they sort of, back when this was made more so than today, but like they would only do one video a month, and it would get tens, if not hundreds of thousands of views. So they're breaking out of the hardcore audience and into the hobby because their videos were entertaining to watch. Like, right. I'm not talking like So Very Wrong About Games. I'm talking about like the hit the hit videos.
To me, I would think I hear what you're saying, and I don't like strongly disagree or anything like that. But I think more of something like tabletop as like the thing that a casual would watch that and be like, oh, totally.
Yeah.
So yes, absolutely peak Shut Up and Sit Down. They were definitely breaching into a really wide audience there.
Not Board Game Co., who I love and watch. I watch his videos because I'm in the hardcore audience. But like the stuff that breaks out of the hardcore audience into that. Yeah, tabletop's the perfect example.
Mm-hmm. And I find that also very importantly for this demographic, I'm going to refer to them as Peter's term, hobby gamers from now on in the presentation, not casual, because I agree that's a much better term. I think that the value that the game provides is very important. They're often going to be like, why is this box so light? Which, again, we'll get to later. And demos are a great way of selling these games. That they will buy games if they're fun and they play them. And the reason why they don't buy tons of games isn't that they're not willing to buy tons of games. It's that they just play the same games with their friends because they don't know about other games. And as soon as they start reaching that sort of tipping point of like, oh, here's this amazing game store with hundreds and hundreds of games, that's often what pushes them into being hardcore gamers.
Yeah. Two things on this. One is that this is the audience that we sold Village Pillage to. We would just get a booth at a convention and just non-stop run demos. I've demoed Village Pillage probably 1,000 times, if not more. I got really good at just like I had all my jokes ready. And after 2 rounds, people were like, cool, I've seen enough, I'm going to buy this. Like they get the core loop and how fun it is. So they would just buy it. And then, like you said, just play it over and over and over. Things and Rings will overtake it. But I'd say Village Pillage is by far my most played game. Not necessarily most sold, but like that is a game that's been out for almost 10 years now. And people have been playing it. It's one of those games that you just pull out weekly because it's so quick and so fun and etc. And then just for people who don't know, because we are old hardcore gamers, Tabletop was a TV show. It was an internet TV show hosted by Will Wheaton of Star Trek fame. And every week or every month, I can't remember how often it released, but he would just play a game with internet funny people. So like Rhett and Link were on, or Paul and Storm, or people like that.
Epic Mealtime Guy.
Yeah. Just like YouTube celebrities, internet celebrities, they'd come on, play a tabletop game. And it was such a huge hit that they called it the tabletop effect, I think, where after a game was on tabletop, you couldn't buy it for 6 months. Like the printers had to the publishers had to go and print 100,000 new units to keep up with demand. Shut Up and Sit Down used to have a similar effect. They don't really have that anymore. They've lost that place in the zeitgeist. But Shut Up and Sit Down and Tabletop are the two that I think of like they were so inherently entertaining if you didn't know the game, and that's so hard to do.
Yeah,
most reviews are for people who have played the game. Go ahead.
I know people who watch Shut Up and Sit Down for games that they're like, I 100% know I have zero interest in buying this game. I just want to watch the review because they're funny.
Yes, yeah. And Tabletop the same way. It's like, oh, I like Rhett and Link. I'll go watch that. Oh, this game seems fun. I'll buy it. They stopped making it after 3 seasons. There was a bunch of drama you can read about, but just so we didn't throw out the word tabletop, which has many meanings with no context. I wanted to dive into that a little bit.
I appreciate it. And last one, for hardcore audiences. So this is where reviewers and tastemakers and cons are super valuable. They also like demos, of course. Everyone likes a demo. But I think that this is the audience where if you get a really good review from Dice Tower, Shut Up and Sit Down, that's going to make waves in this crowd. And the hardcore audience is it's interesting to think about which one is the most valuable to target, because there are more mass market than everybody else. But again, that's the hardest one to reach. I think the hobby gamers are actually the ones that will end up converting the most people to pick up your game, because again, they play the same games over and over again. Whereas the hardcore ones, often they'll get a new game, they'll play it once, right? Like, come on, that's what almost all of us do.
The targeting, we're going to start a publisher series that we'll talk about in a bit. And the targeting the hobby game is, I think, the common thread you'll find watching those episodes or listening to those episodes that come out. Like, everyone wants that hobby audience. Mm-hmm. That's what everyone is aiming for. That $40, $50, beautiful box, accessible. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to read stuff out again?
The pitches, recommendations, seeing it on the shelf, playing it, and this is obviously from the context of the friendly local game store.
Yes. This is all from my perspective, seeing games get sold in my store.
Recommendations. Theme. Player count. A strategy game or a party game. Something excruciatingly specific.
So, sorry.
A good game, price range, usually for gifts, $20 to $40.
Sorry, this is a little bit stiff. When I was giving the presentation, I knew what was coming up, so I knew how far it was, and now I just kind of have to keep tapping until I see where it actually ends. I'll try and be a bit more on the ball with that. So the way that I sort of framed this was, how do people ask me for recommendations? I don't know if this is actually useful to anyone, so I'll just quickly go over it. This is something I probably would cut if I was doing this from scratch today. But this is basically what people ask me for. So this isn't if someone picks up off the shelf. I think
this is super valuable. I think this is cool. This is a unique angle that you have that I am not aware of outside of this.
Cool. All right. So thanks for validating me and giving me a little pat on the back. Now just tell me I'm a good boy and I'll keep going.
Nice work, AJ.
No, I said to say I'm a good boy. So for this one, if someone comes up and asks me for things, sometimes they'll say, do you have a pirate game? I love pirates. I just want a game with pirates, that sort of thing. I've never had someone ask me for something like a quilting game or a game about cats, because those are things that a lot of people don't think of as being an option. But usually when they're
back in 2018.
Yes. I still don't know if the if the hobby gamers would think to do that, but maybe nowadays they would, because
board game teams Flat Out has a whole quilting line. There's patchwork. Cats are the theme. My friendly local game store, Geeky Teas, which I genuinely think is the best game store in the world. I think if you're ever in LA, make sure you go to Geeky Teas. It's insanely above every other game store I've been to. They are also a cat sanctuary. And they have an entire wall, or a little display, I guess, like the size of an average board game shelf, just cat games. All cat games, nothing else.
So next thing that they'll ask for is a player count. We always play with 5 players, but every board game only plays 4. What's a game that can play 5? That type of thing comes up all the time. So the moral of this story is flexible player counts get you recommended if they're good at those player counts. Because if someone comes up asking for a recommendation, if the employee knows about the game, or if the friend knows about the game, or whoever, they're not going to recommend one that's okay at 9. They're going to recommend the one game that's actually great at 9.
Yeah.
So games that do specific player counts really well, I think have a lot of value. And I think this is kind of untapped market potential, by the way. We were talking in our Discord, join our Discord, about holes in the market. This is a great way to identify holes that you can design towards. If there's a great strategy game that plays, 6, 7, 8, 9 people in a reasonable amount of time with a reasonable amount of overhead, that has a lot of value. If someone comes in looking for that specific thing, because they always have their group of friends come over for game night and they have 9 people and they don't want to play a party game, they want to play a heavy strategy game, but they also don't want it to take 9 hours. I think that there's a lot of value into looking at that kind of thing.
You've not touched on the two, I think, most relevant specific player counts.
Do you think one is the most specific relevant player count?
I think that is the second most relevant.
3 player, I would guess. I don't know.
2 players. You don't have this? People are constantly being like, hey, what do you have for 2 players?
Sorry, I thought you meant from the perspective of holes in the market, like things.
No. I'm talking about trying to nail a specific player count. I think.
Right.
I think more people ask for 2-player games than any other player count.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. I was just misunderstanding what you were saying there.
And then you're right. Solo game is the other one where I'm in the middle of pitching a couple of solo games, so they're very much on my mind. And actually, you and I had this conversation off air, if you don't mind me bringing it up, where I was like, AJ, you want to work on a solo game? And you're like, why couldn't we just make it a co-op? And I'm like, but they're different things. Like, for me, there's a real, I don't want to say beauty, but there's a specificity, sort of like your broad point here, about making a game that plays one only and it nails it. And I think there is a huge market for that who won't necessarily buy it's a co-op and you can play it solo. I think they're just 2 distinct audiences, not different audiences, but 2 distinct audiences.
I think it also has to do with the targeting and the telegraphing to players. If you say it's 1 player only on the box, that tells all solo gamers, this is for me.
Yes.
If you see 1 to 6 players on the box, you're probably going to think, okay, there's a solo mode. How good is it going to be? Very big.
Exactly like you were saying earlier of if it plays okay at 7, they're not going to recommend it over the other ones. Games that we've seen a huge wave of this at the moment. The Adam is in Wales. Do you watch Adam in Wales, the board game design videos?
Yep.
He just released one about trends. It's a chapter from his new book that he's got out. And he opens with, here's a bunch of 2-player versions of existing games. And so apparently we're sort of in a 2-player trend at the moment where people are taking Flamecraft is the one on top of mind. There's about to be a 2-player Flamecraft coming to Kickstarter. Flamecraft plays at 2, but this is a 2-player only game. So 2 players are trending, but 2 players have always been, again, I think the most common player count.
Yeah, absolutely.
Most if you think of games, the majority of them, not all, but the majority are 2-player games. Chess, checkers, Go. I guess those are abstracts, but it is. Guess who? 2 players is the default player count, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's the easiest number of people to find. You just find 1 person. And if you have a roommate or a partner living with you or whatever, it's not hard to find 1 person to play games with.
Yeah. Yep. Player count, I think, is such a... that's why you bring it up. Such a useful framing to come into game design through. We mentioned our friend Sean earlier, and you mentioned big player strategy games. That's what I'm working right now. I think it's a 4 to 10 player strategy game that plays best at 8.
Awesome. Next up is someone asking for something, asking for a strategy game or a party game. Those 2 specifically, you might think I'm talking genres here. No, it's those 2. Pardon me. Those 2 genres specifically got brought up the most, at least again back then. And I think that has more to do with limited vocabulary than it does with anything else. Because usually I would ask some follow-up questions to zero in on the right game for them. But if someone comes in and asks for a strategy game, basically what they mean is not a party game. They're like, people bring apples to apples, and I don't want that. What I want is something that has thinking to it. But, if you recommended a 20-minute tactical game, that would fit under their thought process of a strategy game, even though in our minds...
That's common usage, I think.
Right. Whereas a party game for them, that's like, I like apples to apples and Cards Against Humanity. Do you have something that will make me laugh? Is basically what they were asking.
Where would you put something like Codenames?
So, my hot take is that Codenames does a poor job of serving the party game audience. They're asking for party games because it doesn't feel like a party game. And it does a poor job of serving the strategy game market because it doesn't feel like a strategy game. Clearly, Codenames is outrageously successful.
I was going to say, I would very happily have a game that doesn't serve people to that level.
Yes.
I think Codenames is it's my go-to example of the perfect game. I think it's unsurpassed.
See, I think that this is one of the rare, well, maybe I'm giving myself too much credit here, but I think this is one of the rare cases where I just can't be helpful because of my personal bias. I think Codenames, I can play it, but I really don't like it, and I really don't like again,
it's for smart people. I get it. Yeah.
Well, part of what we're talking about earlier, right, is like the when do you pull it out group, and Codenames is one that you could presumably basically always pull it out, and people be like okay with it. But I never have a moment where I'm like, oh, this group would love Codenames. Whereas I absolutely have that for things like So Clover, those kinds of games, where they're a bit more, I don't want to say like pure, but they're a little bit more, they're doing the thing I want to a greater degree.
In fairness, Codenames opened the door to those. This is like our Would Aliens Make Go discussion. Like, So Clover does not exist without Codenames.
and to be clear, like, me not personally loving Codenames is not an indictment on Codenames.
Right.
Let alone, why would anyone care if I had an indictment against the most popular party game of the century?
Your favorite podcast is So Very Wrong About Games, so I can see why you have these opinions.
Of course. So next, someone will be like, they'll come in, they'll say, do you have something like blank? And this is most often from hobby gamers who have grown tired of playing the exact same game hundreds of times.
Catan is the classic example of this.
Yeah. So here's my hot take.
Well, Munchkin.
I think, at least at the time, there was a very strong prevalence of, if a game already exists that does something like this, you do not want to do something like that at all because they'll just buy the popular one. And I think that there's definitely logic to that, but I cannot tell you how many people came in and were like, I have played 1,000 games of The Resistance. Do you have something like The Resistance? Now, clearly, The Resistance was basically the first popular boxed social deduction game. So it's
also incredible. God, that's an incredible design.
Absolutely. But
it's so hard to work in social deduction because you end up just making worse resistance. You really have to break the mold to get away from it. I think I've talked about this before. I think it was like a black hole of game design. Codenames, So Clover, The Resistance. There are some of these games that if you're working in that area, every improvement you make sucks you further towards just being that game. So you really have to hit escape velocity and make something so different that you're not just making worse Codenames or worse So Clover.
Yeah, for our listeners that skipped it, this is our foundational games episode.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
I forgot.
We did a whole episode on this.
We're in the 40s now. I can't even remember what we've talked about.
Sometimes they would ask for something excruciatingly specific. So this, again, isn't super helpful, I don't think, to people, but there's one person who basically came in and described Thief to a T, and I was like, oh, so you want something like Thief.
Yeah.
But if someone wants something like, I really love deck building and I really love pirates, but I also hate, playing with other people. Is there a solo pirate deck building game? It's actually, yes, Friday, but if you don't want that one, I have nothing else to suggest. So this isn't something you can design towards. It's just personal taste. Sometimes people...
I got a meme that I want to send you. It's got a swear in it, so I'm just gonna. Do you have Facebook Messenger open?
I can pop that open quick. Yeah.
This meme, we'll put it in the show notes, and if I don't know if you can pull it onto your screen or anything like that.
Yep.
This is the podcast where you listen to AJ chocolate memes.
Yeah, we'll toss in the show notes or our Discord. But yeah, basically I don't want to give away the punchline. You have to join our Discord. Actually, that's where.
Yeah. No, we'll put it in the show notes.
This is a teaser. Yeah. So next one is people asking for just a good game, where they're just like, I just want to try something new. I don't have a specific thing in mind. I'm just looking for a new game for game night.
Far away. You should get far away.
You should go far away with that joke.
This is where they're just like, you're not recommending the hotness, right? You're like, hey, look, everyone's really into Azul at the moment. Grab Azul.
That's exactly it. Either I'm just going to recommend whatever is popular if I'm one of the employees who doesn't care as much or just knows that it's been popular and it's on the top of your mind, or it's whatever I've been playing recently that's on the top of my mind
Sakura
because
Arms.
I like it. Exactly. So again,
I know your game tastes so well these days. Although Sakura Arms is a pretty safe bet.
Yeah. Man, I love that game. And the next is a price range. This is usually a gift. This is something where someone is like, I want something for this person. They like games. Do you have something that's like $20 to $40? $20 to $40. Oh, this is Canadian dollars. Although with inflation,
so like $1 to $3.
With inflation, it's probably
it's actually probably about the same.
So, yeah, basically, this is someone who's looking for a gift for someone, and either the person buying the gift likes board games and just like wants to get them a board game gift because they want to get them into board games and board games, or it's because they're like, I know this person generically likes board games a lot. What's something that maybe they don't have? And then I would ask, what types of games they like, that kind of thing. But the fact that this is a whole category of thing that people ask for should tell you a lot about pricing your game. If your game is going to be even $45, $50, that gets to the point where it's very difficult to recommend as a gift. Not too many people are like, yeah, I'm just going to blow $50, $60 on someone
present that they may not like or already have, or
yeah.
They want to show Flamecraft, I think, was $40 at release, and that's just like the perfect price point. Critter Kitchen is coming out at $40 as well. That Time You Killed Me was meant to be $40, and in fact, there's a joke in the box about the $40 price tag. And then at the last minute, they had to raise it $50, and the game still did well. I'm not complaining, and I got more in royalties. But I really wonder what a different world we would be in if they'd managed to get that out at $40.
Okay.
Sorry, jump back. I just wanted to ask about in your experience as a retailer, $10 games, was that a thing, or did it just not make sense?
Yeah, you're asking like, did they sell?
Yeah, or did you have many? Like, what's the world of $10 games look like?
Yeah, so mostly that's card games, micro games, those sorts of things. Even Oink games, those were 20 Canadian back in 2016. Right.
So Love Letter would be less than that, I assume.
Yeah, Love Letter was $10. There's very few games that go for 10 Canadian, especially now. For 10 USD, that's basically like 15 Canadian. Then you get into a little bit more. That I think that's probably where we're at these days. Like that would be probably what
that would be the $10.
Yeah, and I think they absolutely have a place. In fact, I think that they have a really valuable place. So if you look at most game stores, in terms of the physical layout, usually they have shelving for all the big games, and the small games actually go at the front. This is prime real estate. Even if they, barring selling better than the other games, because I don't think they did, but those were the most often ones picked up for gifts or things for like kids, especially. If you can get like a kids card game for like $15 or $10, that could go really well. But while and one more small caveat is CCGs or LCGs, like a Game of Thrones living card game, you would see those on like brackets because there's just so many of them. That's just the way that you would merchandise them. But usually at the front counter, you have space for small items in glass cases at the counter or on shelving at the counter, because if you're a friendly local game store, you need to make use of every square inch of your space. Right. And you're not going to fit giant boxes there. You want to fit a lot of small things. So every customer who comes in is going to be right in front of that counter. And if they have to wait there for a minute while I go grab something else, what are they going to do? They're going to pick up and look at those games. So actually, if you have a small box game that's $20 absolute max, hopefully more like 10 to 15, people might impulse purchase it or at least ask me about it. So small box games that you can fit.
That does have a market. I feel like publishers are very reluctant to sign anything because it's just like the margins aren't there. So I was just curious what that looks like from the retail end.
Yep, I had full shelves there. I wish I had a picture of it that I could show you what it looks like, but yep, absolutely a thing that cool. Sells. And those are the most likely ones to get impulse purchased because they're cheap and they're right there in their face. In fact, what I would do is I would take a lot of the top sellers or games that I know are really good in small box, like Love Letter, and I would line the shelf right where people are standing while they're waiting in line with those games. And that's not just because people are looking at them and then if they ask about it, I can tell them how great it is and then they buy it. But it's also because if someone's looking for a small box game, I can just pick it up right away and show it to them. So very good for sales.
It's fun. I feel like this episode is exemplifying what I was talking about, where I'm like, yeah, games like Love Letter. Like, I don't know any of the new. I only know the very hot games and the very old games. That's the extent of my knowledge.
Yeah, same. More and more each year. You want to read the next bit?
The hook. 1 to 2 sentences. Unique, sexy, understandable.
Hooks.
The singular hook. Not 3 types of hook.
I mean, I go into different types of hooks. Give me a little credit here. But the idea of this is give, in the same way that you would just write your hook when you're telling a publisher, you want people to be able to deliver a hook. And so you have to communicate what that hook is to the person selling the game. This is kind of tricky because you're removed from the situation. But if Peter had to give a hook for a popular game, well, Peter, what's a hook for Blood Rage?
Big old minis.
Perfect. You're like, look at these giant monsters. Look how cool that is. That's a hook. It's sexy, understandable. This is the type of thing where the person selling the game or the game itself needs to deliver this to the customer clearly and easily.
The shelf. So, the title. The front cover / shelf presence. Back of the box. Perceived value. BGG / product description. Quality. So, is there? Can I guess the game that you're going to mention here?
I'm not thinking of a specific game at this moment, but hold that for a bit.
I feel like we can't have this conversation without mentioning one particular game. But go ahead.
Go ahead. You can just say the game you're thinking
of. Canopy.
Canvas.
Sorry, Canvas.
Canvas is amazing product design. I actually don't know if it was out for this one.
I was going to say it probably came after this, but it is just the game for front cover shelf presence, beyond everything else.
So this is talking about the type of pitch where the shelf itself, or the game on the shelf, is going to sell it to the person looking at. So for this, you need to think about what is the title of your game. Is the title something where when you say it, the people who are reading it go, oh, that sounds like a cool thing. Like Blood Rage isn't a real word. It's
2 words.
Technically, well, it's a single word as a title.
What?
I'm pretty sure, isn't it? Can you double check for me?
I'm checking right now.
Please do.
Either way, I'm putting money on it being 2 words. Yep, okay. 2 words.
Perfect. 2 words. AJ's wrong yet again. But it's not like as coherent of a sentence. Like, why is the blood raging?
Right. Yeah, it's not a phrase. It's not a common term.
But it gives such strong vibes. There's going to be blood, and there's going to be rage. Yeah. Flamecraft. Flamecraft, though, the title alone doesn't do it. You need the context of the box, which is fine because people are looking at the box.
Yeah.
So in that one, you see Flamecraft. You're crafting things. That's a nice vibe with flame because it's dragons. You can see it's a cute dragon. It's not a big scary dragon. It's getting that across well. So the front cover / shelf presence of the box itself can be a selling point to people. I think I go into this more. I think I go into each of these a little bit more, so I'm skimming over them quickly here. The back of the box is so invaluable. Perceived value is very important to the customers, how much they feel the thing should be worth. Occasionally, people will look up the BGG or the product description listing of it, and the quality of the components, that sort of thing. So, what's in the name?
Unlocatable. Incomprehensible. Meaningless. Boring. These are really the game.
So let's go through them one by one. The game, that's the title of it, is unlocatable. Have you ever tried to search their database of 3,000 games for a game titled The Game?
The Game.
It is.
I did development work on a game called Empires, which had the same problem. You just can't find it.
Yeah. So that's frustrating to me as an employee, and it means that I'm less likely to recommend the game. And if you have a game that has very bad SEO like this, people might not be able to find it even if they are looking for it. There's a game called Top 10. Try to search Top 10 The Game and find the actual game. It's madness. People, please, this is the lowest hanging fruit for things to avoid.
I think we did a whole episode on naming Robotopia where we talked about some of these things too.
Yeah, I think we ran circles a little bit with them, but we probably mentioned a lot of the principles. So, incomprehensible. Peter, can you read this title to everyone?
5-Minute Dungeon.
Now, listeners, what do you think you just heard? Like, literally, write it out or type it out and think, did I write it out correctly? The title is the number 5, not the word 5, and then a space, and then a dash, and then a space, and then minute, and then dungeon. Like,
I don't think there's a space between 5 and minute. It's a adjectival phrase, which means that it should be hyphenated.
Maybe.
Either like the way. Blood Rage debate again.
Yeah, it doesn't hugely matter. Peter's right again. No spaces. Still, the number 5 versus the word 5. I actually would avoid numbers and titles entirely, if at all possible, because of
304. Like, I've played that game, and I could not tell you how that is. Is it 304? Is it 304? Is it numbers? Is it letters? Is it
And including dashes and special punctuation, you're just asking for trouble, people.
Having said that, 5-Minute Dungeon is an incredible description. Like, it tells you exactly what you're getting.
That is very true.
Wits and Wages.
So this one, I think, was just another example of unlocatable, where it's the ampersand. Ampersand is something that, again, you might want to avoid in general, because people, if I told you Wits and Wages is the title, by default you will think of the word and, not the ampersand. And again, these are minor things, but trust me, I have seen people not able to find the game they're looking for.
Do you want to see the worst example of this in history?
Do I ever? Oh, show and tile, but it's a plus, not an and.
Just the worst. I could not win that argument with our artist. She was insistent that this was the only way to do it, and show and tile is already not a great title, if I'm being honest. It's kind of a pun on show and tell, but it's not interesting enough to be a pun on show and tell. But using that plus instead of even an ampersand, oh gosh. I
think it's really close to a good title. Like, it does describe what you're doing in a way, like you're doing your own little,
but not in a way that tells. Like, once you know what you're doing, it tells you what you're doing. But until Wits and Wages, I think it's the same thing. Like, I hear this and I assume it's about bards at a tavern,
right? Yeah.
And once you know the game, you're like, oh yeah, I can see how this describes that. But I just don't think it gets you there without having the curse of knowledge.
It's such a good point. Yeah, the curse of knowledge being you already know the thing, and it's hard to put yourself into the place of someone who doesn't know the thing. And you see where someone who knows the game would come up with that title thinking it's a great descriptor. But you have to think of it from the opposite perspective of, if someone knows nothing about this game, is it a good descriptor?
Material Confluence, Trading and Negotiation in the Elysian Quadrant. Our favorite game title of all time.
Come on,
I feel like we've discussed this a disproportionate amount.
I think we have discussed it the exact right amount it deserves for being, I would say, the second worst title after the game.
Yeah. Frolix.
Yeah, Gil Hova has said that he hates the title, and it became
he changed the wordsy, didn't he?
Yeah, which Wordsy is cute and at least gets across that it's a word game.
and distinctive, and when All Play recently republished it, they kept it as Wordsy because that's a great title.
Yeah, prolix may be descriptive, but if someone has to reach for a dictionary, then you're doing it wrong.
Wordsy.
And there we go, Wordsy. Good job, past AJ.
Sakura Arms.
So listen, Sakura Arms is an amazing game. That's a pretty stupid title.
Yeah.
What do flower blossoms and arms? Oh, it's arms like weapons, but there's not even weapons in the picture of the game because they're using different things. Like, it's just so ridiculous. Maybe it makes more sense in Japanese. That was originally a Japanese game, but I think they did themselves no favors with that name.
I can never find this quote when I want to, but there's a great tweet, which is naming something falls into one of two categories. You immediately have the perfect title, or you never, you spend the rest of your life struggling to find anything that even fits remotely.
Next is
Valyria Card Kingdoms.
Yeah, I think you should avoid fake proper nouns in every title.
Really?
I do. I think...
Catan?
I said fake proper names. Isn't Catan a real place?
No.
Am I wrong? Oh.
You're thinking of Carcassonne.
Oh, I am thinking of Carcassonne. I mean... It's hard for me to be like, yeah, okay, the super successful game should have had a different title, but maybe it would have been more successful with a different name. I don't know. But I think that at least Catan I thought it was a real place. It sounds like it sounds like a real name, where a lot of those like Euro-y games, that's like a stylistic sort of thing. Like it brings you, and originally it was the Settlers of Catan, and that gives you a lot more than just the word Catan. All these like fictional fantasy names, they all to me are just like white noise that blur together. And I think to be fair to your point, it's more the fantasy ones where it's like the Rune Terra or something. It's like it just doesn't mean anything to anyone, and it tells me the game is going to be about fantasy, but that doesn't really get any strong vibes.
If you do it really well, you can kind of get a vibe from it. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't think I'm looking at my list now. I don't think I have a single published or pitched game that has a non-dictionary word in it. Like That Time You Killed Me is very distinctive, but they're all dictionary words.
By the way, while we're on the topic, that is one of the best titles I've ever heard.
It's pretty good. Took us 6 months. 6 months of 4 people trying to come up with a name before Jeff Fraser came in and was like, "I got it."
It was worth it.
Yeah. The closest I have is ransom, which is a real word, but we've taken the vowels out. RNSM. Robotopia. No, Robotopia is a made-up name. Never mind. I have one very obvious example.
the one that we tried to rename for.
Yeah.
and
because this is a part of it. Like, I have an unsigned game called Cityfall, all one word, which is not a dictionary word, but it's 2 dictionary words shoved together like Flamecraft.
And that's why I think Robotopia, like, I don't think it's the best name in the world by any stretch, but I think that one gets a bit of a pass because robots are very clear. Utopia or dystopia, that's like you've clearly merged the 2 words, and it makes sense to anyone reading it what the two words are. If you have a fictional fantasy title like that, go for it by all means.
Right.
But if you're like the Mages of Blizzmorth, it's like
a great example of how to create a fantasy world. Is it fantasy? Maybe it's real world. But anyway, the vibe. I got stuck between vibe and zone. The vibe of fantasy world while using dictionary worlds. Paladins of the East Kingdom, West Kingdom, Raiders of the North Sea. Like, so evocative, completely searchable.
Yes. Yeah. And then...
Mound builders.
Is this not the most boring title? Like,
it's weird.
Mound builders. I sure do want to build some mounds.
You know what should be a boring title, but I think really works is Stone Age.
I think Stone Age does have some weight to it. Like, it does give you some like evocative things of like, ooh, back when it was like prehistoric or.
But it sounds quite generic, I think, but I think it works.
Yeah.
Great titles. Scythe. Twilight Imperium. Twilight Imperium. An Infamous Traffic. Exploding Kittens. Cards Against Humanity. Mysterium. Dead men tell no tales.
So,
Giant eyeball.
I'm always going to go one further and go back to make sure I
You're
didn't
good.
miss it. So I think we're talking about, these wouldn't be all on my top list today. I didn't do notes for this episode, so I'm not going to tell you what my top list would be today, but That Time You Killed Me would
That
be
time
on
you
it.
killed me, yeah. I think Critter Kitchen is pretty damn good. That was Alex, I think. I fought against it because I was like, critter is a dumb word, but I'm not American, so I didn't realize how much cultural cachet it has here.
Scythe, I think, is an interesting example because it does so much heavy lifting in so many subtle ways. Like, a scythe is used to harvest things. Scythe is a game about resource management and Euro sensibilities much more than it is about the stomping mechs. So actually, when people are like, oh, the theme doesn't really match what I thought it was going to be, it's like, well, the front cover isn't the mechs fighting, it's them harvesting stuff. The name of the game is Scythe.
The title gives you more than the premise does.
Yeah. But Scythe does have, like, it can be used as a weapon. There is, like, some, like, it's a sharp-bladed instrument. It does give you a hint of edginess to it. I think it's just a very strong, striking word, Scythe. And Twilight Imperium, that's kind of just made-up stuff, but I do think it gets across the... Well, it's not made-up stuff.
Do you know, like I said, do you know what it means?
No, but I just mean, like... it gives you a good sense of the vibes of the game. Twilight, like the end of something, right?
Yeah.
And
so Twilight is the end of, and Imperium is Empire. It's a game about the old empire. Oh my goodness, the old empire has collapsed, so it's the Twilight Imperium, the end of an empire. I think it's an amazing title. Mm-hmm. I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah. An Infamous Traffic. So this one, I think, does a really good job of scratching the mystery box itch. That's what I like this one as an example for. So, in An Infamous Traffic, it's about the cocaine trade, I think. I've never actually played the game. But as soon as you hear An Infamous Traffic, that immediately makes me think, what is being trafficked, right? Like, what's the deal here? And I think that sort of leading you to question it further is really interesting. Exploding Kittens, I think, like we were talking about before, it's just like such a wacky, memeable thing that you hear and you're like, what do you mean exploding kids? What is this nonsense?
It tells you everything you need to know immediately.
Yeah. Cards Against Humanity. This one, I think, does a very good job of setting the tone for it. Like, you are going to be doing some things that are, like, this is a safe place.
Do you know what phrase it's riffing on?
No, actually.
Crimes Against Humanity.
Ah, it's even better than I thought.
Yeah, it's really solid.
Mysterium. So Mysterium is a made-up word, unless you're going to correct me on that one too. And
my name is Mysterium, AJ.
But it's a mysterious game. It is about a mystery, a murder mystery kind of thing.
And also mystics.
Mm-hmm. Does a very good job getting that. And Dead Men Tell No Tales, like common pirate saying, and it tells you it's a pirate game. It tells you that it's going to be high stakes. There's going to be some death involved, those sorts of things. It's great. That
was the subtitle of Scuttle. Scuttle was Scuttle, Dead Men Tell No Tales, I think, something like that.
Now, I don't know why there's a giant eyeball here. I guess I was just leading to my shelf presence. What it
shelf presence. Like. Fits on the shelf. Sorry, fit on the shelf. Get notice. Create conversations around your game. Show us how to display your game.
So, now we're going to some examples here. So, fitting on the shelf. The Sensei's Path... Oh, man. I really wish I had more notes for this part. So Sensei's Path is an expansion for Onitama. And Onitama is in the exact same shaped box. For those listening, it's a unique vertical rectangular prism that's...
with a square base.
Yeah, and so it's a very unique shape. It's very recognizable. And it's
closer in shape to a Pringles can than a board game, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about.
Yeah, square Pringles can is a good description. So the expansion is just like 15 cards or something like that. And every person who buys it is like, why is it in the same like big fancy box? They could just shrink wrap the cards, and I'm paying more for the box. I'm like, yes. And no one would ever see a shrink wrapped pack of cards. How am I supposed to display that?
Right.
Whereas this one, immediately you walk through the game store, you see this one, you recognize it has to go with the other game, and I guarantee you it sold an order of magnitude more than if it was just a shrink wrap set of cards. Maybe more than that, honestly.
Yeah.
Love Letter is a great example of one that has shelf presence and how to do shelf presence properly, because there's multiple versions of Love Letter. I don't have it on the slide, but they sold like a clamshell one where it's like a plastic case and then it has the bag with the cards inside of it. And they sold a boxed version of it. And I might be mistaken. I know that the premium box was a bigger box. I think at some point they sold a small box and the clamshell one, and they were the exact same contents. Yeah, it's just one had the bag and one had the box.
Yeah.
And the box one outsold the other one significantly, even when I put the two of them side by side on the shelf. The box has a presence that people recognize, and
it fits the form of a game. They understand what they're getting.
Yeah, and importantly, it displays a lot better. If I have, think of a thin clamshell box that's just as the same width as a few cards. That's going to sit flat on the shelf. It's not dynamic. It's harder to see because you have to be looking directly down at it. And if I do have a hook for putting straight on, great, but oftentimes that type of space is reserved for things like Magic cards or LCG expansions, those sorts of things. You're not often going to display those. Whereas a small box that fits nicely on the shelf, that's going to be way easier for me to just sit straight up and people will see it.
I feel like this is the all play model with their small boxes, like Things and Rings Fiction come in this like it's almost designed to be like at the front of the store. It's $20, but it's like 10 inches by 10 inches. I don't know inches that well, but it's not like it's like a decent sized iPhone height in both dimensions, and then half as thick as that. It's just a really nice, satisfying form factor.
If I still worked at the FLGS, I would have every single one of those small box all play games on my front shelf. Every single one of them. They're perfect. They're the right price point. They're the right size.
60 games or something like that.
Yeah, well, I could fit 60 games on there. I had a very big. Well, what you're probably picturing is like the front desk where like I was. But it has a lot of width. There's a lot of front counter space. At least at that.
There's a not there is a. If you're ever at a convention and All Play's there, and if you're at a convention, All Play probably will be there. Go and look at the way that they set up their booth. They have the best booth in the business, like zero competition. Yeah. Because they only have 2 box sizes. They have the little one that I was describing, and then one that's like 2.5 times as big as that. All of their games are in one of those 2 sizes. They're all at the same price point per size, and they just line up so nicely. And they make shelves. So the shelves behind me are actually All Play shelves. And so they've made these custom like booth display things. And the way Joe, who's the owner, put it is like, yep, 5 years of consistency pays off, because you go there and it's just beautiful. Like it's just this incredible display of like similarly sized games. It's very, very satisfying.
Mm-hmm. So this is my fit on the shelf comment. Let's see if I have my slide. Oh, I don't have the slide. Maybe I do it later. I hope I go into it later. Let me just skip ahead really quick. I'll just see. No
spoilers.
Oh, I'm really mad that I didn't put this on here. Oh, because I had the physical props. That's why. All right. Well, man, I really missed that presentation that I did on video where I had it. Actually, if I run really fast downstairs, I can grab the box, but I probably don't. I'm going to. Be right
okay,
back.
I will riff. I was going to do this at the end of the episode, but I'll do it now because I need to fill time. We have got 2 series coming up. 2 series coming up. One is going to be us talking to publishers. So we're going to do little like 30-minute episodes where we talk to a publisher. We ask them what kind of stuff they're looking for, what their brand is. We're going to play the game that we talked about in the unhelpful advice episode where we say like, would you have published this? Why not? Why this? Why not? What's their favorite game they've designed, etc., etc. Please let us know either below in the YouTube comments or by emailing or by joining a Discord which publishers you want us to hit, because we have access to a lot of publishers, and so we want to, I think this will be a really cool series. So just let us know which publishers we definitely should talk to. Throw it in the Discord. We see everything in there. We had a huge influx of people in the Discord recently, by the way. So thank you to everyone who's joined. It's a really lovely community. And then the second thing, AJ, I'm still going, is we are going to start doing a series where we look at sell sheets like we did with AJ's. So what's our email address, AJ?
Funproblemspod@gmail.com. It'll be in the show notes.
So email us at funproblemspod@gmail.com. Please remove anything that you don't want to appear on screen, so like your phone number or your email address or anything like that. You can leave your name on if you want. That's not going to bother us. But if you do submit a sell sheet, and we welcome you to, realize we are going to be honest. You saw the episode with AJ. We're not going to be like, hey, nice job, you made a sell sheet. We're going to be like, look, here's our honest first impressions. And as you saw in that episode, I can be harsh. AJ can be harsh. We're doing it to help you. We're not getting off on being mean. But if you do want to go through the trial of fire, then please send us your sell sheet. And who knows, maybe someone will see it and be like, that looks really cool. But please submit your sell sheets again to
funproblemspod@gmail.com.
Nice. I vamped very nicely. Go ahead.
That's perfect. That is extra perfect because of a little breath from sprinting down 2 flights of stairs and sprinting back up while holding this. It's very, very dense because I have almost everything for it. Love Catacombs. Cool game. So, why was this my example for terrible box design? First things first. You can't tell from just looking at it like this, but it doesn't fit on a calyx. It is just too big.
I was about to say calyx is the industry standard. Like, what was Foundations of Rome?
Mm-hmm.
Huge game that came out from Arcane Wonders fits in a calyx. You gotta fit in a calyx. That's the board gamer shelf of choice. All play shelves are not modeled after the calyx, but they are designed to fit what a calyx can fit because that is the industry standard.
You can stick out a little bit if you have to, but that's the only dimension that you can cheat on.
So, yeah, as in forward.
Yes.
I was like, stick out. What do you mean?
back into the wall. Just
yeah. I was thinking like the top or the side. Okay, I'm gonna get something while you talk. Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm gonna hold this up to the camera as best as I can for a second here. I know that the audience can't see from the audio listeners can't see, but there's some awards down here, text blurb here, and a bunch of wasted space over here, basically. And then a huge health and safety. So that's what I'm going to be referencing. I'm going to set this down now. It is very heavy. This is a game full of wooden tokens. It's a dungeon crawling dexterity game. Think Descent meets Crokinole, if you're familiar with those two. And I have all the expansions. So my out of breathness has nothing to do with me being very out of shape, which I am. So, problems with this box. On the back of the box, you'll see that, like I said, you can go back to the video and pause it there if you want to reference that. I'm going to explain it all. There were a few awards on it, but the awards are on the back of the box. And they actually have more awards than these, but they only, I think, put out like the biggest awards. They were like the Golden Geek, Dice Tower Award. And those are pretty influential awards. It's not
Speaking of awards, AJ, what were we just named?
We were named the second best Canadian board game podcast.
Yeah. Anyway, that's wild. I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Yep. So the problems with this is people who are buying games aren't going to be swayed by awards on the back of the box if they're looking there. They're going to care about the content of it. The people who impulse buy are predominantly the mass market gamers or casual gamers looking for a gift, or some casual gamers will be swayed by awards or get interested in them from awards. But awards don't close the sale. They start the sale. Yep. So you don't put the awards on the back of the box. You put them on the front of the box. And awards usually mean nothing in terms of their clout. Because, yes, the hardcore gamers are familiar with Dice Tower, and a Dice Tower award might get them interested. But the vast majority of your audience doesn't know who these different reviewers are. Ask almost anyone who isn't a hardcore gamer what the Spiel des Jahres is. You know, like this.
I was about to ask if the Spiel, like in Europe, I know the Spiel des Jahres moves units.
It's nothing. Like the Dice Tower award or the Golden Geek means more because at least they're in English.
Really?
Yeah, I've never once. So here's the big lesson. Awards mean something in volume. It's not,
Yes.
oh, this award in particular matters. It's this game won a lot of awards. If you're going to put awards on the box...
Earlier you showed Wits and Wages. Literally, the tagline of that game is the most awarded party game in history.
Yeah. And again, what that does is you put it on the front of the box, people go, whoa, if it won all these awards, it has to be good, right? That they will literally say that. And then be
like... It makes sense. Like, there is a logic to that. It's not a dumb thing to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it's winning... If a game has won 5 awards, it is worth checking out.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean you'll love it. It doesn't mean it's for you. But I really think there is a distinct logic to, oh, multiple panels of people chose this as their game? Cool.
Yeah. So next problem with the back of the box is the use of space is atrocious. I'm going to show it briefly one more time here. So there's so much space of just like, oh, here's some cards and here's some stuff lying there. There's a huge text blurb, which no one's ever going to read, and the text blurb duplicated in French, and then this whole chunk here is just components. Like, it's just like such a huge waste of space. I ended up, Joe, a Slack friend of the show, after I gave the presentation, is like, hey, I'm friends with them. Do you want me to get you in touch? So he got me in touch, and I consulted on the revised box of them, which
Really? I didn't know that. That's so cool.
So I'll put the revised one in the show notes. I don't have a copy of the revised one. I should have asked for one, but
yeah, you absolutely should have.
But yeah, the main things that we did was, first off, it doesn't even say it's a dexterity game anywhere on here.
Yeah.
So it's like, and again, you don't want to say it's a dexterity game. You want to show it. So we put a hand in that was like flicking one of the tokens, showing like how it works there. A much shorter tagline. Again, if you're going to have this text here, you want to be a hook, a short. It's the same thing as you're doing with a publisher. You want it to be 1 or 2 sentences, really sexy, sell the game, go off vibes, that sort of thing. And you want to show what's on the back of the box, what's going on there. Shrink all the stupid, boring stuff people don't care about. No one's going to be like, oh, it comes with 15 item cards, but it also comes with 13 special item cards. Are you kidding?
Yeah. I think in some places it's a legal requirement to list the components, or maybe not a legal requirement, but it's definitely the industry standard. But that doesn't mean listing each type of card separately, because, the extreme version of that is, 1 sword card, 1 dagger card. And if you can say, Critic Kitchen, the deluxe version comes with 256 poker-sized cards. That is in 12 different decks, because there's all these different modules, maybe more. I don't even know the numbers. But when people are asking, how do I sleeve it? We're saying you need 256 poker-sized sleeves. The end.
Yep. And the thing is if yes, put your components on there, but don't put them in the middle of the box and in big font, right? Like tuck it away in the corner so that someone can go there if they want.
Put it at the bottom. We're going to finish this section and then we're going to split this into a 2-parter. So let's keep going. But I'm just giving you a heads up.
Sounds good. See you next time, everyone.
No, wait. No, we're still going.
Oh, got it.
I said we're going to finish this section and then.
Okay. Well, this is going to be a fairly long section, I think. I could be
the boxes that we're on now.
Yeah, I think so. But we can figure it out.
Well, we're gonna stop here. We'll do a fun question and a publisher tip, and then we will come back for part 2, the rest of the box sizes things.
Sounds good.
AJ, you want to stop sharing your screen, and we will do a. Can you do that? Do you have the technology?
Yeah.
Yes. Hello, it's us. We were here the whole time. I have a fun question for you. The one part of the podcast where we're allowed to have fun. I came with one prepared today.
Let's hear it.
What is the non-board game thing that you are working on or involved in that you are most excited by?
That's interesting.
But is it fun? Because it is legally required to be fun, and if not, I can be arrested and deported.
You go first, because I know you have a million projects going on.
Do you know what mine is? I'm working on this thing I've been talking about for literally years at this point. It's so close.
Is it your YouTube channel?
Yes, I'm making a 3-part video essay series about Ted Lasso. And I wrote the first 2 in 2021, and I filmed the first one last year, and I had an editor edit it last year, and now I'm doing my final pass, and it is so close to done. And because AJ doesn't like reading scripts, he's not read anything at this point, so I'm waiting to have this version to send to him to get thoughts and feedback. So AJ, who is as into Ted Lasso as I am, and likes hearing my thoughts on stuff, I'm very excited to share it specifically with you, but also with eventually the world. My
Awesome.
video essay. It's called Ted Lasso Season 1 is Perfect. And it'll be out someday.
Look forward to that. I'm sure we'll add it to one of the show notes or follow-ups or something. For
You're going to say just the end of the episode.
just the whole YouTube video.
Yeah, just the whole thing.
I just meant let people know.
I could put a trailer. You know what? Screw it. At the end of this YouTube, there's going to be a little sneak peek of my video essay. Because why not? We can do that. Not on the podcast, but you have to come to YouTube for it.
Peter, we can do literally anything we want. This is our podcast.
We can do anything.
I think for me, I wouldn't say I'm actively working on it at this moment, but it's in the back of my head. I told the viewers on here / listeners that I used to want to be a writer, and that I stopped that so I could focus entirely on game design. But there's one short story that has always stuck in my head as a thing that I really want to do, and something that's very unique to writing as a medium. And I've been on a bit of a kick of just like researching writing structure and stuff like that, so I can get good enough to just get this out of my head and actually write it. Because I've done some short stories that I'm pretty happy with, but I'm absolutely not like a great writer by any stretch of the imagination. And this one requires longer stretches of stuff and a bit more structure to it. So I've just been doing the preliminary steps of like trying to get into a space where I can get that out of my head and actually do it. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Have I talked about the writing book On Writing Well by, I think it's like William Radcom or something? Have I talked to you about this book?
Probably at some point, but it doesn't ring a bell.
It's from the 70s. I started reading it, and my library copy had to go back, and I'm still waiting for it to come back through my Libby app. Really impressed me. Just really, really impressed me. And it actually is very applicable to board game design. The whole thing that he focuses on is condensing. Don't use 2 words when 1 word will do. Don't use a $10 word when a simple word does the same thing. And within that framework, he shows how you can still have voice and personality, but this is something I have needed to read. I've been a professional author for over a decade now, but I get paid by the word. So in no way am I incentivized to cut my words, but I'm starting to write fiction that I'm going to start pitching to publishers. And so I've known that this is a weak spot of mine, and this book just exactly is for what I need, and I really recommend it. It's called On Writing Well. And the relevance to board game design, which is not why I brought it up, but is that the core kind of principle of this is 2 sentences, one of which is half the length of the other, but says the exact same thing. That is a superior sentence. And obviously subjectivity, blah, 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 but like the good writing, on writing well is literally the name of the thing. On designing well, 2 games that do the same thing, but one has half the rules, that is a superior game by the standards of taste and obviously nothing's objective. We talk about this all the time, but like this book example really illustrated to me why that matters in games.
I'll also take it like one tiny step further, which is 2 tiny steps further. One still applies to games in terms of literal writing, as you've been very big on with just reducing the amount of text on cards and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, this is something that I was about to say fight about. We don't fight about it at all. My job is to do a pass and just cut words. Do you want to talk about the assassin bug example? I think that was really interesting.
Yeah, so that's one, if I know what you're referring to specifically, where I wanted to cut rules, and you went through and just did a pass of trimming words and making it more clear what was going on. And the goal of this, from both of our perspectives, was to make the assassin bug easier for people to understand and play. So I was coming at from the reducing rules complexities side of things, and you're coming at from the cutting literal text from the card to make it more parsable. And after you were finished, you were like, I don't think we need to cut any rules from this.
We probably still will, because we're both driven by that. But I was staggered. This was normally, like I said, I go through and cut all the words. This one I just hadn't for some reason for like 11 drafts. So it had just grown and grown and grown. I was genuinely stunned by how easy that faction is to play compared to how hard it was with the like, we didn't change a single rule, and yet I I think that faction halved its complexity just by tweaking the cards.
Yeah, like, and this is something that is super valuable for designers to be thinking about. Where when you run into a problem, don't just think about why it's a problem. Right?
Yeah.
There's often multiple solutions to the same problem, and sometimes
AJ, we stopped having fun.
Oh, quick thing. Sometimes it's your rules explanation. Sometimes it's the reference card. Sometimes it's iconography based. Pay attention to precisely what the thing is that are tripping people up, and try and solve that.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, and then we finish each episode with a tip on how to get your games more publishable, which is sort of what this whole episode's about. So we could skip it, but we won't. We're going to do it anyway. Do you have one, AJ? Do you want one from me?
You go ahead. I've done everything else this episode. Come on.
That's true. Yeah, I've just sat here and never monologued at all. Certainly not got on a 20-minute rant in the middle that had very little to do with what we were talking about. I'm going to talk about contests briefly, because I think contests are a really interesting way of getting your stuff in front of publishers, or getting some attention from publishers. Now, winning a contest does not mean your game gets published, but I think there is value in looking at what contests are out there. Cardboard Edison is the big one. Button Shy do contests all the time. Oh, no, they do one once a year. BGG has contests, and similar to the awards that we were talking about earlier, it's not that winning a contest means that your game is amazing and will get signed. But if a game has won 3 contests, I promise you a publisher is more likely to look at it than a game that hasn't. I genuinely think like, oh, this won 3 different contests from 3 different things. That is more worth my time than a game that didn't. Again, it's as self-explanatory as 5 awards versus no awards.
So
you look like you disagree.
Yeah, kind of. So, I mean, this is kind of funny because you're one of the most published designers I know, and I don't have a published game.
Doesn't mean I'm right about stuff.
Yeah.
We'll talk about this in the Soul Sheet episodes, but like, I have strong opinions. That does not mean I am correct.
Sure. So my perspective on this comes at from a different angle, which is there's an opportunity cost to entering contests. Now, if it's just a blanket contest of like best game wins, whatever. If it is, which is way more common, here is a contest that puts you under a restriction. Most commonly, it would be 18 card games from Bunshire or whoever.
The Lady and the Tiger contest and the Jabberwocky contest.
Yeah. So the thing is you only have so much time in the day to design. And if you spend your time designing games with an arbitrary restriction, of course, restriction can breed creativity and you might come up with something really great. But oftentimes what you'll end up with is something that was designed around a restriction that would have been better if you hadn't designed around the restriction. And now you have this game that is less sellable to other publishers because they don't care that you followed that restriction. And I had that literally with the Lady and the Tiger contest, where
the 18 card raw.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think is a rock solid game. But then as pitching around, I was like, it's a micro game, and like, well, I don't care about it being exactly 18 cards. Like, can you do it better with other things? I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I can and should now.
I'm going to disagree pretty heavily here, and I'm going to bring receipts. So the two things that make contests worthwhile are we did a contest for Lady and the Tiger and Jabberwocky, so I'm coming at this from a publisher perspective, but also I enter contests as a designer. The two things that I think matter that are relevant here. One is that we published a bunch of the Lady and the Tiger games. Button Shy published a bunch of the contest winners. In fact, Skulls of Sedlick, which is probably Button Shy's second best-selling game after Tussie Mussy, was for a contest. Like that explicitly came out of that contest. And once you have that relationship with the publisher, we've talked about this before, it is easier to publish future games to a publisher you've worked with. Fact. Mm-hmm. Just a fact. Like any Lady and the Tiger designer could email me and be like, hey, can you look at a game? We're not taking pictures. We have not taken pictures for years now. I would absolutely look at that game. Like we have a relationship. We have an ongoing financial relationship on a literal level. But then specifically to your point, I can name a lot of games that have gone into specific restriction contests, won or placed or not placed, and then been reworked into published games. There's a 25th century game called Agueda, the City of Umbrellas. I don't know if you've seen that one. That was actually for the same contest as Skulls of Sedlick. The Skulls of Sedlick contest was make an 18-card game based around a location. 18 cards is insanely restrictive.
Yes.
Did I tell you what the latest Button Shy contest was? It really tickled me.
No.
Make an 18-card game where you only use 9 of the cards each game.
Sure.
Incredible. Some of the stuff that came out, like I'm like, I would buy that immediately. So if you're not inspired by the contest, don't enter. I'm not saying like spend 20 hours on, like, don't treat it like a job. But if I saw that and I was like, how would that work? It tickled my brain. What'd you say? Restriction breeds creativity. Absolutely did that. If it hadn't, I would have stopped. But I end up having a really cool game that I've entered. I don't think it'll win, but I had to get it to the point of polish where it is pitchable. And now I know how to tweak that into a non-18 card, only use 9 card game. And I think you'd be surprised by how many published games, I'm not saying it's like 10%, but like how many games go from they were in a specific contest, they won or didn't win the contest, the designer opened them up, and then they found a home. I think that is a really common, viable pathway. I don't know if I'm overselling it.
I don't know. I mean, I don't have any statistics, so I don't think I can comment further of like how many people go on to sign things versus people who spent the
18 card raw. People looked at that. Like you had that with publishers for quite a while. Mm-hmm. Like you got paid, I think, advances. Or am I misremembering?
I didn't get any advances. I did have a publisher seriously interested, but didn't end up taking it. Yeah.
Right, but that was a game that was from a contest to a publisher. It didn't make it, but you know, it could have.
Yeah. Maybe it still can. Who knows?
Maybe it still can. And if you're getting these notes of like it's too little, cool, tweak it, make it bigger. Don't just make raw. That won't work. Okay, AJ, how do we end this podcast?
By saying goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. You can find us and our incredible Discord community in the show notes, or reach out to us privately at funproblemspodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed the podcast, please tell a friend.